The exhausted teenager cleaned cars after school to help his struggling mother. When a black Mustang pulled up to their house, what the millionaire revealed made them both tremble. The hood of the old Honda Civic creaked as Marcus Johnson lifted it in the dim morning light. Steam rose from the radiator, mixing with his visible breath in the cold air. His hands, already calloused at 16, gripped the dipstick as he checked the oil level for the third time. "Mom, try it again," he called out, taking a step back from the engine. Sarah Johnson turned the key. The starter clicked weakly, followed by silence. She tried again. "Nothing. It's dead, baby," she said, stepping out of the car. Her nurse's scrubs were wrinkled from yesterday's double shift. "We'll have to take the bus." Marcus wiped his hands on his jeans, leaving dark streaks across the worn denim. "I can fix it. Just need to figure out what's wrong." His voice cracked slightly, betraying his frustration. "We don't have time today," Sarah said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "And we definitely don't have money for parts." The mention of money made Marcus's stomach tighten. He'd seen the pile of bills on the kitchen table last night, the red final notice stamps visible even from across the room. His mother had tried to hide them under a magazine, but he knew. He always knew. "Let me at least try to jump it," he insisted, already moving toward their neighbor's apartment. "Marcus." His mother's voice was firm. "The bus leaves in 20 minutes. We need to go." The walk to the bus stop took them past Wilson's Luxury Motors. Marcus always slowed down here, his eyes drawn to the gleaming vehicles lined up like soldiers. Today, a black Mercedes caught his attention, its paint so perfect it looked like liquid metal under the rising sun. "Someday," he muttered under his breath. "What's that?" his mother asked, hurrying to keep up with his long strides. "Nothing." He adjusted his backpack, heavy with textbooks and the extra uniform he needed for his after-school job search. The bus was crowded, filled with other people whose cars had given up on them. Marcus stood, holding the rail while his mother took one of the last available seats. He watched her try to smooth the wrinkles from her scrubs, saw the dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "You should take a sick day," he suggested quietly. Sarah shook her head. "Can't afford it. Not since the hospital cut back on hours." She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Besides, Mrs. Rodriguez needs me today." Marcus knew better than to argue. Since the layoff from her full-time position at Memorial Hospital, his mother had been picking up private nursing shifts wherever she could find them. The pay was less, the hours were worse, and the job security was non-existent. The bus lurched to a stop in front of Eastside High School. Marcus bent down to kiss his mother's cheek. "I'll find something today," he promised. "A real job, not just lawn mowing. Focus on school," Sarah called after him. "That's your job right now." But Marcus was already moving through the crowded aisle, his mind on the help-wanted signs he'd spotted yesterday. The auto shop classroom smelled of motor oil and potential. Marcus felt his shoulders relax as he pulled on the blue coveralls with his name stitched above the pocket. Here, at least, he knew what he was doing. "Johnson," Mr. Peterson's voice boomed across the garage. "Get over here and show these rookies how to properly check brake fluid." Marcus moved to the demonstration vehicle, an ancient Toyota that had seen better decades. His hands moved automatically, explaining each step as he worked. "See how it's low?" He pointed to the reservoir. "That could mean a leak in the system. You always want to check the lines and the caliper seals if you notice the level dropping." Mr. Peterson nodded approvingly. "Golden hands, this one," he told the other students. "Natural talent." The praise felt hollow in Marcus's stomach. Natural talent didn't pay bills or fix their car. It didn't put food on the table or keep the lights on. The rest of the school day passed in a blur of classes he couldn't focus on. His mind kept drifting to the classified section of the newspaper he'd picked up, to the jobs that might hire a 16-year-old with no experience but plenty of determination. The final bell rang at 3:15. While other students rushed to their cars or sports practice, Marcus changed into his good shirt, the one with no oil stains, and headed toward the business district. The first 3 places turned him down before he could even finish explaining why he'd be perfect for the job. "Must be 18. Need a driver's license. Looking for someone with experience." Each rejection felt like another pound of weight on his shoulders. The sun was setting when he reached the last place on his list, a small auto parts store on the edge of town. The manager at least let him fill out an application, but Marcus saw him slip it into the bottom of a thick stack as he left. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Bus broke down. Walking home from Mrs. R.S. Don't worry. Marcus checked the time. She'd be walking at least an hour, after being on her feet all day. He could picture her limping slightly, favoring her bad knee that never quite recovered from last year's fall. He leaned against a brick wall, letting out a long breath that fogged in the cooling air. The sound of expensive engines purred from the direction of Wilson's Luxury Motors. Marcus pushed himself up. One more try. Maybe they needed someone to clean the showroom floor, wash cars, anything. But the dealership's lights were already dim, the closed sign mocking him through spotless glass doors. Tomorrow, he told himself. He'd try again tomorrow. The walk home took him past 3 more car lots, each vehicle a reminder of what they couldn't afford. Their Honda might be old, but it was paid for, or it had been, until it decided to die this morning. He found his mother asleep on the couch, still in her scrubs, an empty cup of instant ramen on the coffee table. Marcus covered her with their only throw blanket and picked up the bills she'd been reviewing. Electric, past due water, final notice rent, late fee added. He set them down carefully, trying not to let the papers shake in his hands. In the kitchen, he counted out their emergency cash, barely enough for 2 weeks of bus fare. The refrigerator hummed loudly in the quiet apartment, its empty shelves a reminder of how thin they were stretching each dollar. Marcus grabbed a pen in the classified section he'd been carrying all day. He circled 3 more possibilities for tomorrow. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Marcus lay in bed, listening to the irregular tap of their leaky faucet, his mind racing with calculations. If he could find a job paying even minimum wage, working weekends and after school, if they could cut back on groceries even more, if the car trouble wasn't too serious. The numbers never quite added up, but he kept trying until exhaustion finally pulled him under. His last conscious thought was of the Mercedes he'd seen that morning and how much someone would pay to keep it looking perfect. He didn't know it yet, but that thought would turn out to be more important than any calculation he'd made that night. Saturday morning arrived with a cold drizzle that somehow made the wealthy part of town look even more pristine. Marcus pulled his thin jacket tighter around his shoulders as he walked past manicured lawns and gated driveways. He'd already covered his usual territory closer to home. Now he was pushing into neighborhoods where the houses had 3-car garages and the cars in them cost more than his entire apartment building. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Any luck? Not yet, he typed back. Still looking. The brief exchange reminded him why he was out here in the first place. His mother had picked up an extra nursing shift, again, despite barely being able to walk after yesterday's bus breakdown. The memory of her limping through their apartment this morning fueled his steps. The rain picked up, and Marcus ducked under the awning of an upscale shopping center. That's when he heard it. The sound of someone cursing softly, followed by the clatter of something metal hitting concrete. Around the corner, in the parking lot of a self-service car wash, an elderly man in an expensive suit stood staring at a pressure washer nozzle like it was written in ancient Greek. His Mercedes, the same model Marcus had admired earlier that week, was covered in road grime, water beading ineffectively on its dusty surface. Marcus watched the man fumble with quarters, dropping several on the wet ground. His first instinct was to keep walking. People in this neighborhood didn't usually welcome help from teenagers who looked like him. But something about the man's frustrated determination reminded him of his mother trying to figure out their bills. "Excuse me, sir." Marcus stepped forward, hands visible at his sides. "Would you like some help with that?" The man turned, surprise and wariness crossing his face. He looked Marcus up and down, taking in his worn clothes and scuffed shoes. "You know how to work this thing?" His voice carried the weight of authority, even in question. "Yes, sir. I detail quite a few cars." Marcus gestured to the pressure washer. "You're trying to use the high-pressure setting, but for a finish like yours, you'll want to start with the foam cannon." Interest flickered in the man's eyes. "You seem to know your automobiles." "I love cars, sir, especially ones like yours. S-Class, right? 2023? The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "Indeed. I'm Richard Harrison." He extended his hand, and Marcus shook it firmly, just like his mother had taught him. "Marcus Johnson, sir." Mr. Harrison glanced at his car, then back at Marcus. "Well, Marcus Johnson, would you care to demonstrate the proper technique?" "It would be my pleasure, sir." Marcus moved to the equipment panel, quickly selecting the right settings. First, we'll do a pre-rinse to remove loose debris. Always work top to bottom to avoid scratching the paint. As he worked, Marcus fell into a rhythm, explaining each step as naturally as he had in auto shop class. He noticed Mr. Harrison watching intently, not just the car but Marcus's movements, the careful way he handled the equipment, the attention he paid to every detail. You want to be extra careful around the emblems and trim, Marcus explained, demonstrating with gentle movements. Water can get trapped underneath and cause oxidation if you're not thorough with drying. Where did you learn all this? Mr. Harrison asked, moving closer to observe Marcus's technique. Some from my auto shop teacher, Mr. Peterson, but mostly from experience. I've been helping neighbors with their cars since I was 12. Marcus smiled slightly, though nothing quite like this beauty. The conversation flowed easily as Marcus worked. He told Mr. Harrison about his classes, his love for cars, carefully avoiding mentions of their financial struggles. The older man shared stories about his first car, a beaten-up Chevrolet he'd bought for $300, and how he'd learned the value of proper maintenance. The secret to success, Mr. Harrison said, watching Marcus buff the last water spots from the Mercedes surface, is attention to detail. People notice when you care about your work. Marcus stepped back, surveying his handiwork. The car gleamed in the now clearing sky, every surface perfect. That should do it, sir. Mr. Harrison walked around the vehicle slowly, inspecting every angle. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes told Marcus he was impressed. Exceptional work, young man. How much do I owe you? Oh, no charge, sir. I was happy to help. Marcus began cleaning up the supplies, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in his stomach. Nonsense. Mr. Harrison pulled out his wallet. Quality work deserves fair compensation. He handed Marcus several bills. Marcus's eyes widened slightly at the amount, more than he'd usually make in a week of odd jobs. Sir, this is too much. It's exactly right for the level of service provided. Mr. Harrison reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card. Wilson's Luxury Motors. I own the dealership. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He knew that dealership, had walked past it countless times, dreaming of working there. Words formed and died in his throat as he realized this might be his chance. But before he could figure out how to ask about job opportunities, Mr. Harrison was already moving toward the driver's door. Thank you again, Marcus. You've reminded me of something important today. The Mercedes purred to life, and Mr. Harrison pulled away, leaving Marcus standing in the car wash bay with a handful of cash and 1,000 unasked questions. That evening, Marcus helped his mother count out bills at their kitchen table. The money from Mr. Harrison would cover the late fees and keep the lights on for another month. Sarah hugged him tightly, not asking where the money came from, trusting her son completely. You're too young to carry all this, she whispered into his hair. I'm not too young to help, he replied, thinking of Mr. Harrison's business card, safely tucked in his wallet. And things are going to get better. I can feel it. Later, in his room, Marcus pulled out his laptop, a refurbished model he'd gotten for his 15th birthday, and searched for Wilson's Luxury Motors. The website showed gleaming vehicles and smiling employees in pressed uniforms. He imagined himself there, working among those cars, learning from professionals who knew every aspect of the business. His finger traced over Mr. Harrison's card. Should he have been more direct? Should he have asked about jobs right there at the car wash? The questions chased themselves around his mind as he drifted off to sleep. In his dreams, he was detailing cars in a spotless showroom, his mother watching proudly from a comfortable chair, her nurse's scrubs replaced by clothes that didn't bear the weight of endless shifts and worried nights. The sound of bills being shuffled in the kitchen woke him early Sunday morning. Another day of searching ahead. But now he had a target, a specific place where his skills had already been noticed. He just had to figure out how to turn that chance encounter into something more. The stack of mail hit the kitchen table with a thud that seemed to echo through their small apartment. Marcus stared at the red notices peeking out from between junk flyers and credit card offers. His mother was still sleeping after another night shift, but he could hear her restless movements from the next room. Final notice. The top envelope screamed in bold letters. Marcus opened it carefully, trying not to tear the paper. Their electricity bill had doubled since last month. Below it lay their car insurance cancellation notice. Not that it mattered much with the Honda sitting dead in the parking lot. Opening his laptop, Marcus typed Wilson's Luxury Motors careers into the search bar for what felt like the 100th time since Saturday. The same job listings appeared. Sales associate, 5+ years experience. Master technician, ASE certification required. Finance manager, bachelor's degree needed. Nothing for a 16-year-old with golden hands, but no formal qualifications. His phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Peterson. Got those scholarship applications ready to review whenever you're free. Marcus closed his eyes, remembering the application fees. Even the reduced rates would eat up half of what Mr. Harrison had paid him. Money they desperately needed for bills. Maybe next semester, he typed back, hating how the words felt like giving up. The sound of his mother coughing drew him to her bedroom door. Sarah Johnson lay curled on her side, dark circles visible under her eyes even in the dim light. "Mom!" Marcus stepped inside. "You okay?" She tried to sit up, wincing. "Just tired, baby. These double shifts are taking some getting used to. You're sick." He pressed a hand to her forehead. "And you've got a fever." "Can't be sick," she muttered, swinging her legs over the bed's edge. "Mrs. Rodriguez needs me today. And we need the money." Marcus watched her struggle to stand, her knee nearly buckling. "Mom, stop. You can't work like this. Watch me." She took a shaky step toward the closet where her scrubs hung. "Please." Marcus blocked her path. "Just one day. Rest. I'll figure something out." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw tears forming in her eyes. "You're 16, Marcus. It's not your job to figure things out. It's mine. We're a team, remember?" He guided her back to bed. "Let me help. Just today." She didn't have the strength to argue. Within minutes, she was asleep again, her breathing labored. Marcus returned to the kitchen, pulling out his phone. He dialed Mrs. Rodriguez's number, explaining the situation. The elderly woman was understanding, but her words cut deep. "No work, no pay, dear. That's just how it is." Back at his laptop, Marcus stared at Wilson's Luxury Motors website. The image of Mr. Harrison watching him work flickered through his mind. He'd been impressed. Marcus was sure of it. But was it enough? The local car wash was hiring, minimum wage, but it was something. Marcus grabbed his jacket, pausing to check on his mother before heading out. The bus ride took 4 to 5 minutes, each stop a reminder of their broken-down Honda. Marcus pressed his forehead against the cool window, watching luxury cars cruise past. A black Mercedes identical to Mr. Harrison's caught his eye, and his hands instinctively mimicked the washing motions he'd performed Saturday morning. The car wash manager, a heavy-set man named Frank, barely looked up from his phone during the interview. "Experience?" "Yes, sir. I detail cars privately, and I'm in auto shop at school." Frank snorted. "This ain't some fancy detailing service, kid. It's a wash and dry operation. $10 an hour, no benefits, no guaranteed hours." Marcus thought of his mother's fever, of the bills on the table. "When can I start?" "Got your work permit?" "Yes, sir." Marcus pulled out the carefully preserved document. "Tomorrow, 4 p.m. Don't be late." The walk home was longer than the bus ride, but Marcus needed to save the fare. His phone buzzed again. "Mr. Peterson. These vocational programs could change your life, Marcus. Full ride if you qualify. Just need the application fee and some recommendation letters." Marcus kicked a stone, watching it skitter across the sidewalk. The application fees might as well have been $1 million. His mother needed medicine. They needed groceries. The electric company needed their payment. A familiar purr made him look up. Through Wilson's Luxury Motors window, he saw Mr. Harrison talking to a customer. The older man's posture radiated confidence, authority. Everything Marcus wished he could project right now. Before he could stop himself, Marcus was pushing open the dealership's door. The blast of air conditioning hit him along with the smell of new leather and success. "Can I help you?" A saleswoman approached, her smile faltering slightly as she took in his appearance. "Hi. I was hoping to speak with Mr. Harrison. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he knows me. I'm Marcus Johnson. I helped him Saturday at the car wash." Her expression shifted from skeptical to curious. "Wait here." Marcus stood perfectly still, afraid to touch anything in the immaculate showroom. Through the glass walls of his office, he could see Mr. Harrison finishing up with his customer. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, the saleswoman returned. "I'm sorry. Mr. Harrison is booked solid today with appointments." Perhaps you could come back another time. Marcus's throat tightened. Could you? Could you just tell him Marcus stopped by? The kid from the car wash. She nodded, already turning away. The walk home felt twice as long. His mother was sitting up in bed when he arrived, trying to read through work schedules with fever-glazed eyes. Got a job, he announced, forcing cheerfulness into his voice. Car wash. Starting tomorrow. Sarah looked up, concern crossing her face. What about school? After school and weekends. It's all good, Mom. Rest now. That night, Marcus lay awake listening to his mother's cough through the thin walls. $10 an hour. Minus taxes. Maybe 20 hours a week if he was lucky. The math tumbled through his head, never adding up to enough. His phone lit up with a notification. A new email. From Harrison. R at Wilson Luxury Motors. Subject. Regarding your visit today. Marcus's heart stopped. His finger hovered over the screen, trembling slightly. The message was short. Marcus, come by the dealership tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. We should talk. Harrison, sleep didn't come easily that night. But for the first time in weeks, his dreams weren't filled with bills and broken-down cars. Instead, he dreamed of opportunities, of chances, of maybe, just maybe, finding a way forward. Marcus arrived at Wilson's Luxury Motors at 3:15 p.m., his auto shop uniform freshly washed and pressed. He'd caught the earliest possible bus after school, his heart pounding the entire ride. The dealership's glass doors reflected his image, a tall, thin teenager trying his best to look professional despite his obvious nervousness. The same saleswoman from yesterday spotted him first. Mr. Harrison is finishing up a meeting. Have a seat. She gestured to a leather couch that probably cost more than 3 months' rent. Marcus perched on the edge, afraid to lean back. His hands felt empty, useless. Around him, salespeople moved with practiced ease among vehicles worth more than he'd see in 10 lifetimes. A silver Bentley caught his eye, its paint so perfect he could see his reflection across the showroom. Marcus. Mr. Harrison's voice cut through his thoughts. Come on back. Following the older man through the showroom felt like walking through a dream. Employees glanced their way, curiosity evident in their expressions. Mr. Harrison's office sat at the far end, windows overlooking both the showroom and the service department. Sit down, son. Mr. Harrison settled behind his desk. Tell me why you came by yesterday. Marcus swallowed hard. I want a job, sir. Any job. I'll wash cars, sweep floors, whatever you need. How old are you? Marcus. 16, sir. Mr. Harrison leaned back, studying him. That creates some complications. Insurance, labor laws, limited availability with school. I have my work permit, Marcus said quickly, pulling it from his pocket. And I can work any hours after school and weekends. I'm a fast learner, sir. You saw that yourself. I did. Mr. Harrison stood, moving to his window. Tell me something. That Mercedes, how did you know it was a 2023 S-Class? The front grille design changed that year. Plus, the LED signature on the headlights is different from the 2022 model. They also added the... Marcus caught himself starting to ramble. I read a lot about cars, sir. Mr. Harrison turned, a slight smile playing at his lips. Follow me. They walked through a door into the service department. The smell of oil and leather polish filled the air, mixing with the subtle whir of pneumatic tools. It smelled like possibility. Jim, Mr. Harrison called out. A man in his 50s looked up from under a lifted BMW. Got a minute? Jim rolled out, wiping his hands on a shop rag. His eyes narrowed slightly at Marcus. This is Marcus Johnson. Tell him about that detail job that came in this morning. The problem child? Jim grunted. 2021 Porsche 911. Owner's complaining about swirl marks in the clear coat. Says our regular guys can't get them out. Mr. Harrison turned to Marcus. What would you do? Marcus's mind raced through everything he knew. First, I'd need to assess the depth of the marks. If they are only in the clear coat, I'd start with a paint depth gauge to measure how much clear coat we're working with. Then probably a multi-stage polish, starting with a medium-cut compound on a foam pad to remove the deeper swirls, followed by a fine polish to restore the gloss. But I'd test in a small area first, maybe the lower door panel, to make sure the clear coat can handle the correction. Silence followed his answer. Jim's eyebrows had risen slightly. Kid knows his stuff, he finally said to Mr. Harrison. He does. Mr. Harrison turned back to Marcus. Here's what I'm proposing. 2 days a week after school, plus Saturdays. You'll start in detailing, under Jim's supervision. Minimum wage to begin with. We'll review after 30 days. Marcus's heart leaped. Yes, sir. Absolutely. There are conditions. Mr. Harrison held up a hand. Your grades can't slip. One bad report from school, and we're done. You'll need parental consent. And you'll have to cancel that car wash job. Marcus's stomach dropped. Sir, I need more hours than that. The car wash was offering full weekends and... Marcus. Mr. Harrison's voice was firm but not unkind. Quality over quantity. Learn the business properly. Prove yourself here, and we can discuss more hours. But I won't set you up to fail by overwhelming you. The practical part of Marcus's brain did the math. 2 afternoons plus Saturdays at minimum wage wouldn't cover what they needed. But this was Wilson's Luxury Motors. This was his shot. When my mother gets better, he started, then stopped himself. He hadn't meant to say that out loud. Mr. Harrison's expression shifted slightly. Better. She has a fever. Nothing serious, Marcus added quickly. She'll be fine in a few days. Jim and Mr. Harrison exchanged a look Marcus couldn't quite read. Tell you what, Mr. Harrison said. Let's start with 3 days after school, plus Saturdays. But the grade requirement stands. I want to see your report card every month. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The words tumbled out. Jim will show you around, get you started on some basics. I got another appointment. Mr. Harrison headed back toward his office, then paused. Oh, and Marcus? Get yourself some proper detailing supplies. The shop will reimburse you. Jim watched his boss leave, then turned to Marcus. All right, kid. Let's see what you can do with that Porsche. But first, here. He tossed Marcus a dark blue shirt with the Wilson's logo. Can't have you working in that school uniform. The shirt felt heavy in Marcus's hands, heavy with responsibility, with opportunity, with promise. He changed quickly in the employee bathroom, staring at his reflection. The logo seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Feeling better. Going to try working tomorrow. Marcus typed back quickly. Got the job at Wilson's. Real job. Good pay. Please rest one more day. Her response came immediately. So proud of you, baby. But we need the money. I'll be fine. The weight of reality settled back onto his shoulders. Even with this job, they were still walking a tightrope. His mother was still sick. Bills were still due. Kid. Jim's voice echoed from the shop. That Porsche isn't going to fix itself. Marcus tucked his phone away. One step at a time. He had his foot in the door. Now he just had to figure out how to keep it there while keeping everything else from falling apart. The Porsche gleamed under the shop lights, its black paint revealing every imperfection. Marcus ran his hand along the surface, feeling the swirl marks beneath his fingers. This he understood. This he could fix. Ready whenever you are, he called back to Jim, already reaching for the paint depth gauge. Time to prove Mr. Harrison hadn't made a mistake. Marcus arrived at Wilson's Luxury Motors at 6:30 a.m., a full 2 hours before his Saturday shift was supposed to start. The morning air was crisp, and the dealership's lot was empty except for a few cars waiting for service. He used his newly issued key card, the plastic still shiny and stiff, to let himself into the detailing bay. The lights hummed to life, revealing the Porsche from yesterday. Its paint was already transforming under his careful attention, but there was still work to be done. He'd stayed up late researching techniques, watching professional detailers work their magic on similar problems. You're early. Jim's voice made him jump. The service manager stood in the doorway, coffee in hand. Wanted to finish the Porsche before the owner comes at noon, Marcus explained, already pulling on his work gloves. Jim walked over, inspecting the car's surface with a critical eye. Not bad for your first day. But watch this. He pointed to a barely visible line in the clear coat. You're pushing too hard on the edges. Let the polish do the work. For the next hour, Jim showed Marcus techniques he developed over decades in the business. The teenager absorbed every word, his hands learning the subtle differences in pressure, the way the polish responded to different angles. Mr. Harrison doesn't usually hire kids, Jim said, watching Marcus work. What did you do to impress him? Helped him wash his Mercedes. Marcus focused on a particularly stubborn swirl mark. Just got lucky, I guess. Luck's got nothing to do with it. He sees something in you. Jim paused. Don't waste the opportunity. By 8:30, other employees began arriving. Marcus noticed their curious glances, heard the whispered conversations. The new kid. Harrison's project. The teenager in detailing. His phone buzzed in his pocket. His mother. At work. Double shift today. Left soup in fridge. Love you? His hand tightened on the polishing tool. She was still sick. He could hear it in her voice messages. But they needed every hour, every dollar she could earn. Focus, kid. Jim's voice snapped him back. You've got the owner coming in a few hours, and we've got 3 more cars after this one. The morning blurred into a symphony of buffers, polishes, and careful inspection. Marcus moved from the Porsche to an Audi with water spots, then to a Mercedes with paint oxidation. Each vehicle presented new challenges, new opportunities to prove himself. At 11:45, the Porsche's owner arrived, a man in an expensive suit who reminded Marcus of Mr. Harrison. Jim led the inspection, pointing out the transformation. The owner ran his hand along the surface, his frown gradually softening into approval. Who did this work? He asked. Our new detailing specialist, Jim replied, glancing at Marcus. The owner's eyebrows rose slightly as he took in Marcus's age, but he simply nodded. Good job. Very good job. After he left, Jim clapped Marcus on the shoulder. You just made a friend. That guy's got 4 other cars he brings here. Pride swelled in Marcus's chest, but it was quickly tempered by exhaustion. He'd been on his feet for 6 hours straight, and his arms ached from buffing. The afternoon stretch loomed ahead, filled with more vehicles needing attention. During his lunch break, Marcus checked his online classes. The notification icon showed 3 missed assignments. He'd been so focused on learning the dealership systems that schoolwork had slipped. Mr. Harrison's warning echoed in his mind. One bad report from school, and we're done. He wolfed down his sandwich, peanut butter, the cheapest option at the grocery store, while trying to complete a math worksheet on his phone. Numbers blurred before his eyes. Marcus. Mr. Harrison's voice made him look up. The owner stood in the break room doorway, elegant as always in his tailored suit. A word. Following Mr. Harrison to his office, Marcus ran through everything he'd done that day, searching for mistakes. Had the Porsche owner complained about something he'd missed? Sit down. Mr. Harrison gestured to a chair. Jim tells me you were here at 6:30 this morning. Yes, sir. I wanted to make sure the Porsche was perfect. Admirable. But we have rules about overtime. You can't clock in more than 30 minutes before your shift. Marcus's heart sank. I wasn't trying to get extra pay, sir. I know. Mr. Harrison held up a hand. Your work ethic isn't in question. But we need to do things properly. Understood? Yes, sir. Mr. Harrison studied him for a moment. How's your mother? The question caught Marcus off guard. She's working today. Getting better. And school? Marcus swallowed hard. Keeping up, sir. Mostly. Mostly isn't good enough, Marcus. This job is an opportunity, not an obligation. Don't let it derail what's really important. The words stung because they were true. Marcus nodded, unable to meet the older man's eyes. Take tomorrow off, Mr. Harrison said. Catch up on your studies. We'll see you Monday after school. But, sir, I need the hours. That wasn't a suggestion. Mr. Harrison's tone was final. Focus on school. The cars will still be here. The afternoon passed in a blur of work and worry. Each car Marcus detailed represented hours of pay they desperately needed. How could he take Sunday off when their electricity bill was due Tuesday? When his mother was working double shifts while sick. At 5 p.m., Jim appeared with keys to a new Lexus. Last one for today. Owner needs it by Monday morning. Marcus looked at the clock, then at the keys. I can stay late. Get it done tonight. What did Harrison tell you about overtime? Please, Jim. I need this. The older man sighed, studying Marcus's face. 2 hours max. I'll clock you out on time and pay the extra cash from my pocket. But don't make a habit of it. Marcus worked until his arms felt like lead, until every muscle screamed for rest. The Lexus paint gradually came back to life under his careful attention. He was so focused he didn't notice Jim watching from the doorway. You're good, kid, the service manager said quietly. Really good. But you're going to burn yourself out at this rate. Marcus straightened up, his back protesting. Can't afford to slow down. No. Jim pulled out his wallet, counting out bills. Here's for the extra hours. Go home. Rest. Come back Monday ready to work smart, not just hard. The bus ride home felt longer than usual. Marcus's phone showed 3 missed calls from his mother and another notification about late assignments. He leaned his head against the window, watching the city lights blur past. Their apartment was dark when he arrived. A note on the kitchen table read, "Working late. Leftovers in fridge. Don't wait up. Love, Mom." Marcus opened the refrigerator. The leftovers were half a container of soup and some crackers. He closed the door without taking anything, his appetite gone. In his room, he opened his laptop, determined to catch up on schoolwork. The screen swam before his tired eyes. Numbers and formulas merged into meaningless patterns. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Don't forget to eat. So proud of you." Marcus looked at his reflection in the darkened window. In the Wilson's uniform, he almost looked like someone who belonged in that world of luxury cars and success. Almost. But appearances didn't pay bills or buy groceries or keep his mother from working while sick. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd catch up on schoolwork in the morning and find some odd jobs for the afternoon. Mr. Harrison didn't need to know. He finally fell asleep at his desk, his uniform still on, dreams filled with endless lines of cars needing his attention and stacks of bills that never seemed to get smaller. The sound of metal scraping against metal froze Marcus's blood. He stood in Wilson's detail bay, the buffer hanging limp in his hands, staring at the long scratch now marring the pristine surface of a $250,000 Ferrari F8 Tributo. The morning light streaming through the windows illuminated the damage with cruel clarity. "What happened?" Tom, one of the senior technicians, rushed over. His face darkened as he saw the scratch. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." Marcus's throat went dry. I was just buffing out some swirl marks. The pad must have caught something. On a Ferrari?" Tom's voice rose. "Do you have any idea what this is going to cost?" Other employees were gathering now, drawn by the commotion. Marcus could feel their eyes on him, hear their whispers. His hands trembled as he set down the buffer. "I can fix it," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "If I can just, don't touch anything else." Tom pulled out his phone. "Jim needs to see this." The next 15 minutes were the longest of Marcus's life. He stood rooted to the spot, the scratch seeming to grow longer and deeper under his gaze. His mind raced through calculations. His pay for the next several months wouldn't come close to covering the repair cost. Jim burst through the door, his face already set in a grim expression. He took one look at the Ferrari and cursed under his breath. "Everyone back to work," he barked at the gathered employees. Then, quieter, to Marcus. "What happened?" Marcus explained again, his voice shaking. Jim inspected the scratch carefully, running his finger along its length. "The owner's coming at noon," Tom said. "He's some hotshot lawyer. Already complained twice about minor issues." Jim straightened up. "Call the paint shop. See if they can take it now. And you," he turned to Marcus, "wait in my office." The walk to Jim's office felt like a march to execution. Through the showroom windows, Marcus caught sight of Mr. Harrison arriving for the day. "Please don't let him find out," Marcus prayed silently. But of course, he would find out. This was his dealership, his reputation, his chance taken on a 16-year-old kid who'd just proved everyone's doubts right. Marcus sat in Jim's office, his Wilson's uniform suddenly feeling like a costume he had no right to wear. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "Power company called. Need full payment by tomorrow or they're cutting us off." "Don't worry, baby. I picked up an extra overnight shift." The words blurred as tears threatened to form. He blinked them back hard. He couldn't cry. Not here. Not now. The door opened, and Marcus's heart sank further. Both Jim and Mr. Harrison entered. "Show me," Mr. Harrison said simply. They walked back to the service area. The Ferrari sat accusingly under the lights, its wound impossible to ignore. Mr. Harrison studied the damage in silence. "It was an accident." Marcus's voice cracked. "I'll pay for it. Whatever it costs, I'll..." "Stop." Mr. Harrison's voice wasn't angry, which somehow made it worse. "Jim, give us a minute." After Jim left, Mr. Harrison leaned against a workbench. "Tell me what's really going on, Marcus." "Sir, you're exhausted. Making mistakes. Your teacher called me yesterday. You're falling behind in classes. This isn't like you." Marcus stared at the floor, shame burning in his chest. I saw you working Sunday, Mr. Harrison continued. When I specifically told you to take the day off. I'm sorry, sir. We needed. I wanted to. Your mother's still sick, isn't she? The question caught Marcus off guard. He nodded slightly. And the bills aren't getting any smaller. Another nod. So you're working yourself into the ground, trying to fix everything at once. Mr. Harrison sighed. I know the look, son. I've seen it in the mirror. Marcus finally looked up. Sir, I started in this business washing cars, just like you. Worked every hour I could get. Nearly killed myself trying to prove I belonged. He gestured at the Ferrari. Made mistakes too. Bigger ones than this. What happened? Someone gave me a chance. A real chance. Not just a job. Taught me that success isn't about working yourself to death. It's about working smart, learning the right way, and taking care of yourself so you can take care of business. Marcus glanced at the scratch. I don't think I deserve that chance anymore. This? Mr. Harrison waved at the Ferrari. This is a car. It can be fixed. But you're burning out. Son, that's harder to fix. I can't afford to slow down, Marcus whispered. The power's getting cut off tomorrow if we don't pay. Mom's working triple shifts while she's sick. I have to. You have to let people help sometimes. Mr. Harrison straightened up. The scratch is coming out of the dealership's insurance. Your job is safe, but with conditions. Relief flooded through Marcus so strongly his knees nearly buckled. First, Mr. Harrison held up a finger. No more overtime. Period. Second, you're taking 2 days off to catch up on schoolwork. Third, he pulled out his phone. Give me your mother's number. Sir. The dealership's looking for a part-time receptionist. Regular hours. Better pay than private nursing. Medical benefits after 90 days. He looked at Marcus pointedly. Think she'd be interested? Marcus stared at him, speechless. This isn't charity, Mr. Harrison added firmly. We need someone reliable, and I have a feeling it runs in the family. But she needs to get well first. No good to anyone running herself into the ground. Marcus recited his mother's number, his voice barely above a whisper. Now, Mr. Harrison turned to the Ferrari. Show me exactly what happened. Treat it as a learning experience. What would you do differently? For the next hour, Marcus walked through every step, every decision. Mr. Harrison listened, occasionally offering advice or asking questions. The paint shop called. They could fix the scratch, but it would take 2 days. Take this as a lesson, Mr. Harrison said as they finished. In life and in business, it's not about never making mistakes. It's about how you handle them when they happen. By closing time, Marcus's shoulders felt lighter despite the day's events. His mother had called, crying happy tears about the job offer. The power company had agreed to an extension after Mr. Harrison made a call. And somehow, impossibly, he still had a job. As he was leaving, Jim stopped him. Hey, kid. About this morning. I'm sorry, Jim. I should have been more careful. Yeah, you should have. But you owned it. Didn't try to blame anyone else. He handed Marcus a thick envelope. Your regular pay, plus the overtime you weren't supposed to work. But Mr. Harrison said, this is the last time. Jim cut him off. From now on, we do things by the book. Deal. Marcus took the envelope, nodding. Deal. The bus ride home was different that night. Instead of feeling like another step in an endless climb, it felt like the start of something new, something sustainable. His mother was home, off work for the first time in weeks. The apartment smelled of actual cooking rather than instant noodles. Mr. Harrison called again. She said, hugging him tight. Told me about the Ferrari. Marcus tensed. He also told me how you handled it. Said it proved he was right about you. She pulled back, looking at him with tired but happy eyes. Things are going to get better, baby. We just have to be smart about it. That night, Marcus caught up on 2 weeks of homework, his mind clear for the first time in months. The bills were still there. The challenges hadn't magically disappeared, but something fundamental had shifted. He was no longer trying to carry the weight alone. The morning air was crisp as Marcus arrived at Wilson's Luxury Motors. It had been 2 weeks since the Ferrari incident, and things had begun to shift in subtle but significant ways. His mother was starting her new position today. Her health finally recovered enough to work regular hours. The power had stayed on, Thanks to Mr. Harrison's intervention and a payment plan they could actually manage. Marcus. Mr. Harrison's voice caught him as he headed toward the detail bay. My office, please. The walk to the office felt different now. Still respectful, but no longer terrifying. Mr. Harrison sat behind his desk, a stack of papers in front of him. Close the door, he said, gesturing to a chair. We need to talk about your future. Marcus's stomach tightened slightly. Is something wrong, sir? Wrong? No. Mr. Harrison picked up one of the papers. Your latest progress report from school. All A's and B's. Quite a turnaround. Been able to focus more, Marcus said. Regular hours help. Indeed. Mr. Harrison leaned forward. Which is why I want to propose something. A structured program, specifically for you. He pulled out a detailed schedule, laying it on the desk between them. Marcus leaned forward to read it. Monday through Thursday, you work here from 4 to 7. Fridays off for studying. Saturdays, full shift in detailing. But, he held up a finger, that's just the beginning. Mr. Harrison stood, moving to the window overlooking the service department. Each month, you'll rotate through different areas of the business. Detailing, basic maintenance, customer service, even sales observation. A complete education in the automotive industry. Marcus's heart began to race. Sir, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet. There's more. He turned back to face Marcus. The dealership will cover your ASE certification costs once you're 18. In return, you maintain your grades and commit to learning every aspect of this business. The possibilities made Marcus's head spin. ASE certification meant higher pay, real career opportunities, a future he'd barely dared to dream about. Why? The question slipped out before he could stop it. Mr. Harrison smiled slightly. Because 30 years ago, someone did the same for me. Because talent without opportunity is a waste. And because, he sat back down, I've seen how you look at these cars. Not just as machines to be cleaned or fixed, but as dreams to be realized. A knock at the door interrupted them. Jim poked his head in. Sorry to interrupt, but the kid's got his first customer waiting. The Ferrari owner's back. Marcus's stomach dropped. The scratch. No, Jim grinned. He's got another car he wants you to detail. Specifically asked for you. Mr. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Seems your reputation is growing. We'll finish this discussion later. Go on. In the service bay, a pristine Lamborghini Huracan waited. Its owner, the Ferrari lawyer, stood nearby, keys in hand. Heard you learned your lesson with the F8, he said, but there was no malice in his voice. Jim tells me you're the best detailer they've got now. Show me. Marcus walked around the car, assessing its condition. The clear coat's got some minor swirling from automatic car washes. I can correct that, bring back the full depth of the paint. Probably take about 4 hours to do it right. The owner nodded approvingly. You know your stuff, kid. Do it right. And I've got 3 more cars that need your attention. As Marcus gathered his supplies, he caught sight of his mother through the showroom windows. She sat at the reception desk, looking professional in her new outfit, handling calls with growing confidence. Their eyes met, and she gave him a small wave. The work flowed naturally now. Each movement with the buffer was precise, calculated. No more exhausted mistakes, no more rushed jobs. The Lamborghini's paint gradually came alive under his hands. Looking good, Jim commented, passing by. Oh, and your mom's killing it up front. Already organized the whole filing system. Pride swelled in Marcus's chest. They were both finding their footing, both proving themselves worthy of the chance they'd been given. During his lunch break, Marcus reviewed Mr. Harrison's proposal again. The schedule was demanding but manageable. Real training, real opportunities, real future prospects. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Just got our first benefits package paperwork. Actual health insurance, baby. And Mr. Harrison says there's a tuition program. Marcus smiled. He hadn't told her about the ASE certification offer yet. Wanted to make sure he could handle everything first. The afternoon passed in a blur of work and learning. Jim had started teaching him basic diagnostic procedures between detailing jobs. Every car told a story, and Marcus was learning to read them all. You're getting better, Jim said, watching Marcus complete the Lamborghini. Not just the work, your whole approach. More confident, more professional. Had good teachers, Marcus replied, buffing out the last section. When the owner returned, his inspection was thorough. He ran his hand along the paint, checked every angle under the lights. Finally, he nodded. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. He pulled out his wallet. Your tip. And my card. Call my office tomorrow. Got a whole collection that needs this kind of attention. After he left, Marcus stared at the business card. Personal clients meant extra income. But more importantly, it meant trust. Reputation. A future. Mr. Harrison appeared beside him. Well done. Ready to continue our discussion. Back in the office, Marcus finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind. What if I mess up again? You will mess up again, Mr. Harrison said simply. Everyone does. The question is whether you'll learn from it. So far, your track record is promising. He pushed a contract across the desk. Take this home. Read it carefully. Discuss it with your mother. This isn't just a job offer. It's a commitment. From you and from us. Marcus picked up the papers with slightly trembling hands. Thank you, sir, for everything. Thank me by succeeding, Mr. Harrison replied. Now go finish your shift. Properly. By the book. The bus ride home that evening felt different. Marcus sat with the contract in his lap, reading every word. Through the window, he caught his reflection. Still young, still learning, but no longer drowning. His mother was already home when he arrived, humming as she cooked actual groceries bought with her first advance. Good day, he asked, though her smile had already answered. The best. She hugged him tight. We're going to be okay, baby. Really okay. Marcus showed her the contract, explained the training program. She read every page, tears forming in her eyes. See? She touched the Wilson's logo on his shirt. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places. We just have to be brave enough to accept it. That night, Marcus lay in bed thinking about curves ahead. Not just car curves he was learning to polish and perfect, but the curves life threw at you. 2 months ago, he'd been drowning in responsibilities, trying to carry everything alone. Now he had a path forward. Not an easy one. There would still be bills to pay, challenges to face, mistakes to overcome. But a real path, with real support, real opportunities. His phone lit up with a text from Mr. Harrison. Decision tomorrow. Marcus typed back immediately. Yes, sir. I'm ready. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cars to master, new skills to learn. But for the first time in a long time, Marcus was truly ready to face them. Not alone, but as part of something bigger. 6 weeks into the new program, Marcus stood in the service bay, watching the sunrise filter through the windows. His new schedule had become a comfortable rhythm. School, work, study, repeat. No more exhausted scrambling, no more desperate overtime. Just steady progress, one day at a time. Early again. His mother's voice made him turn. Sarah Johnson looked different now, rested, healthy, wearing the Wilson's Luxury Motors blazer that had replaced her worn nursing scrubs. Just reviewing the manual Jim gave me. Marcus held up the thick ASE certification study guide. Got a lot to learn before 18. Sarah smiled, adjusting her name badge. Mr. Harrison says you're picking it up faster than anyone has seen. Speaking of work, Marcus checked the time. Aren't you early too? New filing system to organize. Besides, she winked, someone taught me the value of getting ahead. They shared a quiet moment, both aware of how far they'd come. The electricity was on, the kitchen had real food, and last week they'd even started a small savings account. Marcus. Jim's voice boomed across the bay. Got something special for you today. A flatbed truck was backing up to the service entrance, carrying a car under a weathered cover. Jim gestured for Marcus to help him guide the truck into position. What's this? Marcus asked as they began unfastening the straps. Mr. Harrison's personal project. Jim pulled back the cover, revealing a 1967 Mustang Fastback. The classic car had clearly seen better days. Its black paint was faded, rust spots dotted the fenders, and the interior needed complete restoration. Beautiful, isn't she? Mr. Harrison appeared, running his hand along the car's dusty surface. Bought her 30 years ago. Been meaning to restore her ever since. Marcus walked around the vehicle, mentally cataloging everything that needed attention. Original 390 engine. Good eye. Mr. Harrison smiled. Needs a complete rebuild. Thought you might want to learn on something special. Me? Marcus looked up, surprised. But I'm just starting basic maintenance training. Best way to learn is hands-on. Jim will supervise, but this is your project now. Every step, every decision, every detail. The implications hit Marcus like a wave. This wasn't just car restoration, it was trust. Real, substantial trust with a vehicle that clearly meant something to Mr. Harrison. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Mr. Harrison checked his watch. Staff meeting in 10 minutes, Sarah. Marcus, get this beauty settled in Bay 3. Jim will walk you through the initial assessment. Throughout the morning, Marcus documented every aspect of the Mustang's condition. Jim taught him how to properly photograph and catalog each component, explaining how this documentation would guide their restoration plan. Paint's going to be tricky, Jim noted, showing Marcus how to measure the thickness in different areas. Multiple resprays over the years. We'll need to strip it completely. Original color? Marcus asked, already thinking about the process. Raven black, according to the data plate. But that's a discussion for later. First, we need to get her running. They spent the next hour checking the engine. Marcus learned how to properly assess bearing wear, cylinder compression, and valve timing. Each lesson built on his auto shop classes, but with a depth and precision he'd never experienced before. During lunch, Marcus found his mother in the break room. She was chatting with Alice from accounting, looking completely at home in the corporate environment. The Mustang's owner called again, Sarah mentioned as he sat down. Wants to know if you can detail his Porsche next week. The Ferrari guy. Marcus grinned. That's his fourth car this month. Words getting around, Alice chimed in. Half the luxury car owners in town are asking for the young detailer who's a perfectionist. Marcus felt his face heat up slightly. The extra income from private clients had helped them start their savings account, but it was the reputation he valued most. After lunch, Mr. Harrison called Marcus to his office. The restoration manual for the '67 Mustang lay open on his desk. I want to be clear about something, he said as Marcus sat down. This project isn't just about learning mechanics. It's about project management, attention to detail, and making decisions that affect value and quality. Yes, sir. You'll document everything. Every part replaced, every technique used. Think of it as building your portfolio. He paused. Could be useful when you apply to engineering schools. Marcus blinked. Engineering schools. Your grades are there. The experience you're getting here is unique. And the dealership's education fund. Mr. Harrison smiled slightly. Well, let's just say it covers more than ASE certification. The possibility hadn't even occurred to Marcus. College had always seemed like an impossible dream, something for other people with more resources. That's years away, Mr. Harrison continued, noting Marcus's expression. Focus on now. Learn everything you can. The future has a way of taking care of itself when you lay the right foundation. Back in the service bay, Marcus began cleaning the Mustang's engine compartment. Each component told a story of use, of neglect, of potential waiting to be unleashed. Jim showed him how to properly document and bag each part they removed, explaining the importance of organization in long-term projects. Restoration's not like regular repairs, Jim said, helping Marcus remove the battery tray. Can't rush it. Can't cut corners. Everything has to be perfect. Like Mr. Harrison, Marcus observed, noting how the owner's attention to detail influenced every aspect of the dealership. Exactly like that. He built this place the same way we're going to rebuild this car. One piece at a time, done right. As the afternoon wound down, Marcus's mother stopped by the service bay. She smiled at the sight of him carefully cleaning engine parts, totally absorbed in his work. Dinner at home tonight? She asked. Made lasagna this morning before work. The simple normalcy of the question, dinner at home, real food, both of them off work at a reasonable hour, still felt new and precious. Wouldn't miss it. Marcus began cleaning up his workspace, properly labeling each container of parts. Mr. Harrison appeared as Marcus was finishing. How's she looking? Good bones, Marcus replied, unconsciously mimicking Jim's assessment style. Engine needs work, but nothing we can't handle. I've documented everything we removed today and started researching original specifications. Excellent. Oh, and Marcus. Mr. Harrison handed him a folder. Your first quarter performance review. Jim speaks very highly of your progress. Inside the folder, Marcus found not just a positive review but a modest raise, his first ever. The number wasn't huge, but it represented something greater: recognition, progress, professionalism. "Thank you, sir. You earned it. Keep this up, and there's plenty more opportunity ahead." The bus ride home that evening felt almost luxurious. No exhaustion, no stress about bills, just quiet satisfaction and plans for the Mustang restoration racing through his mind. Their apartment smelled of cooking when he arrived. Real cooking, not microwave desperation meals. His mother hummed in the kitchen, the sound mixing with the bubble of sauce and the promise of better days. "Got my review today too," she said as they sat down to eat. "Full benefits approved, and they want me to train as an office manager." Marcus grinned. "Mom, that's amazing. Life's funny, isn't it?" She reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "A few months ago, we were drowning. Now look at us." After dinner, Marcus spread out the Mustang's documentation on his desk. The restoration would take months, maybe a year, but that was the point. Mr. Harrison was teaching him more than just car mechanics. He was teaching him how to build something lasting. His phone buzzed with a text from Jim. "Found some original parts catalogs for the Mustang. Bring your camera tomorrow." Lots to learn. Marcus smiled, already imagining the next day's lessons. The path ahead was long, but for the first time in his life, he could see it clearly, and it looked beautiful. The morning sun glinted off the dealership's windows as Marcus parked his bicycle in the employee lot. After 3 months of steady work and careful saving, he'd been able to buy the used bike, a small step toward independence that saved precious dollars in bus fare. "Marcus," Mr. Harrison's voice carried across the lot. "My office, please. Bring your mother." Sarah was already at her desk, organizing the day's appointments. She looked up questioningly as Marcus approached. "Mr. Harrison wants to see us both." They found him standing by his office window, gazing at something in the lot below. He turned as they entered, his expression unreadable. "Please, sit down." He gestured to the chairs before his desk. "We need to discuss transportation." Marcus's heart skipped. Were they in trouble for something? But Mr. Harrison was smiling slightly. 3 months ago, he continued, I took a chance on a 16-year-old with golden hands and his mother who needed a fresh start. Since then, you've both exceeded every expectation. He picked up a folder from his desk. "Sarah, your office reorganization has increased our efficiency by 30%. The new filing system is being implemented across all our locations." Marcus watched his mother straighten with pride. "And you, Marcus?" Mr. Harrison turned to him. "Top of your class in school. The Mustang restoration is ahead of schedule. Your detail work has brought in dozens of new clients. Jim says you're absorbing mechanical training faster than most certified technicians." "Thank you, sir," Marcus managed, feeling his face warm. "Which brings us to today." Mr. Harrison pressed a button on his desk phone. "Jim, bring it around, please." Through the window, Marcus saw Jim pull up in a car that made his breath catch, a black Mustang GT, about 5 years old. Not brand new, but maintained to perfection. "Follow me," Mr. Harrison said, heading for the door. Outside, the morning sun played across the Mustang's paint like liquid obsidian. Jim stood beside it, holding a set of keys and grinning. "The dealership has a program," Mr. Harrison explained, running his hand along the car's hood. "Employee financing at special rates. Usually reserved for full-time staff with at least a year of service." He turned to face Marcus and Sarah. "I'm making an exception." Marcus stared at the car, then at Mr. Harrison. "Sir, you need reliable transportation. Both of you do. The payments would be manageable on your combined salaries, and maintenance costs would be covered by your employee benefits." Sarah stepped forward. "Mr. Harrison, this is too much. This isn't charity," he cut her off gently. "It's an investment in valued employees. The payments will build your credit history. Marcus can practice his maintenance skills. And," he smiled, "no more bus schedules." Jim tossed the keys to Marcus, who caught them reflexively. "Take her for a test drive. I got the paperwork ready when you get back." Marcus's hands trembled as he unlocked the door. The interior smelled of fresh leather and possibilities. His mother slid into the passenger seat, tears glistening in her eyes. "Go on." Mr. Harrison nodded. "Get to know your new ride." The Mustang purred to life under Marcus's touch. He adjusted the mirrors, checked all the gauges, everything Jim had taught him about proper vehicle operation flowing naturally now. As they pulled out of the dealership, Sarah wiped her eyes. Can we really do this? Marcus did the math in his head. Their combined income, the special financing rate, their reduced expenses now that they were both working stable jobs. Yep, Mom. We really can. They drove through their old bus routes, past the spots where they used to wait in rain and snow, past their apartment building where the Honda still sat, a reminder of harder times, past Marcus's school, where his grades now matched his automotive passion. Mr. Harrison said something interesting yesterday, Marcus said as they waited at a red light. Asked if I'd considered engineering school after graduation. Said the dealership's education fund might help. Sarah turned to him, fresh tears forming. Baby, that would be. I know. Marcus smiled, feeling the Mustang's quiet power under his hands. Everything's changing, isn't it? They returned to the dealership to find Jim waiting with paperwork. The terms were better than they'd imagined. Mr. Harrison had pulled every string possible to make it work. As they signed the final documents, Mr. Harrison appeared with a small box. One more thing, he said, handling it to Marcus. You'll need this. Inside was a nameplate for his service bay. Marcus Johnson, apprentice technician. Official promotion, Mr. Harrison explained. Comes with a raise and expanded responsibilities. Jim says you're ready. Marcus ran his fingers over the engraved letters. 3 months ago, he'd been a desperate teenager washing cars for pocket money. Now he had a career path, a mentor, a future that stretched beyond mere survival. The restoration project continues, of course, Mr. Harrison added. Speaking of which, how's the engine rebuild coming along? Almost ready for testing, Marcus replied, slipping naturally into professional mode. Jim's been teaching me about proper timing adjustment. We should have it running by next week. Excellent. Mr. Harrison handed Sarah a set of duplicate keys. The Mustang's waiting in your assigned parking space. Marcus, Jim needs you in the service bay. Mrs. Rodriguez's Mercedes is due for delivery this afternoon. As Sarah headed to her desk and Marcus to the service bay, Mr. Harrison called after them. Oh, and Marcus? The Ferrari owner called. Says his brother wants to meet the young man who does such exceptional work. Marcus grinned. Another client, another opportunity to prove himself. The weight of responsibility felt different now, not crushing, but energizing. In the service bay, the '67 Mustang restoration project waited alongside Mrs. Rodriguez's Mercedes. Jim was already preparing the day's tools, but he paused to admire Marcus's new nameplate. Feels good, doesn't it? He asked. Earning your place? Marcus nodded, running his hand along the classic Mustang's frame. Everything we learned here. He gestured to the restoration project. It's like life lessons too. Take your time. Do it right. Build something that lasts. Speaking of building, Jim handed him a work order. Ready to learn about transmission service? Your Mustang will need maintenance eventually. As Marcus dove into the day's lessons, he caught glimpses of his mother through the showroom windows. She moved confidently among the sales staff, handling calls and coordinating appointments. No more exhaustion, no more endless nursing shifts. During his lunch break, Marcus drove the Mustang to a local deli just because he could. The freedom of movement, the tangible reward for hard work and dedication, felt almost unreal. His phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Harrison. Don't forget, grades first, cars second. Keep up the good work. Marcus smiled, typing back. Yes, sir. Thank you for everything. Back at the dealership, he parked in his assigned space, right next to his mother's spot. 2 Mustangs, 2 lives transformed, 2 futures brightening. The afternoon sun caught the black paint, creating a mirror where Marcus could see his reflection. The Wilson's uniform, the apprentice badge, the confident set of his shoulders, all earned, all real. Jim's voice carried from the service bay. Kid, time to fire up that '67 engine. Marcus turned from his reflection, ready for the next lesson, the next challenge, the next step forward. The weight of responsibility still rode his shoulders, but now it was balanced by opportunity, support, and the knowledge that he wasn't carrying it alone. He was building something lasting, not just cars, but a future. One careful step at a time, just like Mr. Harrison had taught him. And it was beautiful.